Am I on? Yes, okay. So today I'm going to give you all a brief history of user recruitment from the big bang and starting point of our journey into recruiting for UX, and an overview of what our universe looks like now. Then I'll go on to some tips for how to approach the journey into user recruitment yourself, which some of you may be familiar with, but hopefully I can give you some new ideas and some predictions for the future of user recruitment. So don't worry, I'm not starting from the beginning of time. Instead, for the next 30 minutes, I'm just going to focus on the last 5 years and the major changes that I've experienced as a result of the growth and development of the UX industry. So how did I get here? Unsurprisingly, my childhood dream was not working in user recruitment. In fact, I wanted to be on the radio like my dad. He is a broadcast journalist, and I love to talk, as probably some people found out last night at the speaker's dinner. So after studying a drama degree, which taught me a huge amount about human nature, communication, and improvisation, which is something I think Steve mentioned as being sort of a key skill within user research, but also a key skill for a recruiter, I almost fell into this role following a brief stint where I was sucked into a black hole recruiting people for administrative office jobs. In total, I've got over 7 years' experience recruiting people of some kind and over 4 years' experience recruiting users for UX research and digital transformation projects. And although I'm not on the radio, all of my jobs have revolved around talking and asking people questions. So currently, I'm Business Development Director at People for Research. We're a specialist user recruitment agency, if you hadn't worked that out already, working in the digital and UX sector. As a company, we've been around for over 25 years. Back then, recruitment meant calling round people in your little black book and hosting a focus group in your lounge or front room. Our experience now is light years away from that. We work across the board. Our clients include massive global tech giants, leading UX agencies, small startups, companies in the process of setting up their own UX function. And to put some context to some of the information I'm going to share, around 40% of the projects that we recruit for are B2B, 60% are consumer-focused. We manage over 100 projects a month, recruiting over 1,000 participants each month. We send out over 1 million emails every month, inviting people to participate in research. 5 years ago, we were only sending out around 20,000 emails a month. And so far this year, we've worked with over 150 individual companies. We've recruited anything from business owners, teachers, VR gamers, sports fans, app fanatics, pensioners, car owners, the list goes on. But let's focus just for a minute on what recruitment looked like 5 years ago. For us, we were a small team working out of an office underneath a viewing facility, mainly recruiting groups of 8 to 12 people, all to the same recruitment criteria. And majority of what we did was evening focus groups. The company set up by Paul Gooding, who's here today, grew out of a fieldwork model where recruitment would be done by a network of recruiters, all following their own individual method, and that was the industry standard. Recruitment for user experience 5 years ago meant working to really simple criteria, often taken from anecdotal personas created by a marketing team. Again, we were recruiting maybe 6 or 12 people per round of research, all to roughly the same criteria. We're now operating at a more advanced level. All recruitment is managed in-house. We regularly recruit 8 to 12 people or more per sprint. Each person is recruited to different criteria, representing different and very specific persona. The industry standard has changed. Over 85% of our recruitment now is for daytime UX research and testing. And all recruitment is managed in-house by us to a very specific process to match the exacting requirements of our UX client base. So to quote BBC GCSE Bite Size, scientists believe the universe began in a hot big bang 13,600, I hope I got that number right, million years ago, and the universe continues to expand today. This is the same with us. I can't pinpoint an exact catalyst for our big bang, but there is certainly a point around 5 years ago where we suddenly saw an increase in demand from UXers in line with the growth of the industry. Now we work almost exclusively with UX and digital teams, and the universe of user recruitment is still expanding and becoming ever more complex. Over the last 5 years, these are some of the changes that we've seen. There's been a 100% increase in the criteria That's the number of points that we're screening against to select suitable people. The number of questions that we include in our screening document has increased by 80%. There is a discrepancy there because we're just asking more sort of complex, nuanced questions. The timeframes of a user's experience have become much more relevant as UXers aim to recruit people who are interested, recruit people who are in that process of going through that exact experience. And tools like Intercom, so I've heard, are amazing for that. Some of the sort of examples that we come across really regularly is first-time buyers who are literally just about to purchase their first home. And we're also recruiting people based on very subtle behaviour or emotional responses to an experience, not just based on an action, such as someone who shops online. So here's a question from a screener from 5 years ago. It's very straightforward, and we would maybe then go on to ask, what do you buy online? Now we're asking much more specific questions, capturing behaviour around device preference for certain types of purchase. What's typical for them? Where are they when they're doing it? How long have they been doing this for? And then we're recruiting people with a mix of behaviours. We're pinpointing also what software people are using, whether it's an app on a tablet or a mobile. Is it a browser on a computer or a browser on a tablet or on a phone? As often the client that we're working with would maybe only be interested in one thing. And really now, in comparison to 5 years ago, there are so many more variables to consider. And it isn't just the recruitment criteria and the screening process that's developed. As recruiters, it's essential that we have a grasp on different research methods. We're now recruiting users for a greater variety of research types and finding that more clients that we work with are running larger and more comprehensive research programs with a greater requirement for users along the way. And I think based on how many clients we work with, it's a snapshot of a change in the industry, really. Each of the research types requires a change to the way in which we recruit. So we've seen more sprints. We're doing more than just website testing. There's more research at every point during the research process. As I'm sure many people in this room are aware, more companies are setting up their own internal teams. There's greater investment in UX, and there's more tools available, whether that be, I think there's a couple of guys here from Native Eye, Intercom. I mean, I could list them, but there's hundreds of different tools to support what UXers are doing. So user recruitment isn't really just a box-ticking exercise. Our clients are just as invested as we are in finding the most suitable users for their research. And as we move further along our journey, what we thought were just stars turn it out to be whole galaxies with so much more to learn about, in order to help our clients get the best and most relevant results for their research. But how does this all relate to actually recruiting users? So to save you getting sucked into a vortex, considering the vast distance that we've travelled, I put together a guide for writing a solid recruitment brief based around these 6 open questions. And I'm going to talk through these 6 things now and what to think about. And really, I recommend writing a recruitment brief regardless of who's doing your recruitment, whether you're a researcher tasked with doing the recruitment yourself. Going through all of this up front just will make the process that much smoother, not just for you, but also for the user that you're researching with. So let's start with why. Well, we work as partners to our clients, and we encourage our clients to treat us almost like an extension to their business. So we ask a lot of questions. Asking why they're running the research helps to give us context. For example, if you provide personas to work with, have they been validated, or is that one of the reasons for running this research or testing? If it's just discovery research and actually you don't really know your users at all, then we can probably contribute more than you realise. If you're working with an external recruitment partner and you know that you're going to have more than one round of research and it's going to be a longer sort of, there's an overall research strategy with lots of different things happening, then again, share that information. We learn a lot about the users when we're screening them, not just the basic information that we pass across to the client, but more subtle things that they happen to mention when they're on the phone. We assess their communication skills, their confidence levels, where they went on a holiday, even what they're having for lunch. People just share this information with us. Also, Who did we screen out and why? Is there a group of users that you're unaware of who we might have stumbled across when casting our telescope across the galaxy? One of the government departments that we work with who support UK businesses exporting overseas asked us to kind of get more involved at a more complex level, not just sort of recruiting people for website testing. Their potential customers don't even know yet that they are potential customers because exporting is not on their radar. So we did groundwork to understand what types of companies have the potential to export. Then we approached owners of these companies and got them engaged with the subject to help our client understand their journeys from the very early stages on a much longer scale. So this might be the most sort of obvious one, but who? Who are your users? And more importantly, how are you going to identify them? Be specific in any of the language that you use, and this goes for if you're also screening the participant as well. Some things are open to interpretation, depending on the content, the context, and a person's relative experience. We advise avoiding terms like regularly. This is a term that's possible to misinterpret because users may end up giving you false information based on their understanding of regular. If someone else is doing the recruitment for you, being more specific when putting together your recruitment brief will help save time when you're sort of doing an initial kick-off call with that person or meeting with that person. Also, are you asking the user to identify behaviour that's usually subconscious? If so, this may be a constraint on the screening process. We all know that users can't usually identify their own behaviour accurately. So consider other things that you might use to identify that behaviour as part of the screening process. I remember when recruiting people for a website redesign project for a large shoe retailer, they had a sort of general recruitment section and they specified all users must regularly shop online. Okay, that's fine. That's most people these days. They also then had personas to recruit against. And one persona valued the quality of the shoe over the price, and they were willing to pay more for the right kind of shoe. The result was that people who matched one type of persona naturally shopped at a different frequency to people who matched another type of persona. Regularly meant different things to each person. So, as I said, based on our research, the number of criteria that we're recruiting against has doubled in the last 5 years. The number of questions we need to ask each person has naturally increased too, but we've had to adapt our process so we can understand user behaviour in the setting of a rapidly changing digital world. Plus, we have experience of knowing ourselves when users aren't able to identify their own behaviour. For example, you'd be surprised how many people use a news aggregator or read news online through social media, and they're not able to accurately say which news sources they go to most. So what are you testing? So why is it important to tell us what you're testing? Well, if you tell me that you need 6 people because you're developing a new app and you want them to come along in 2 weeks' time, a likely assumption is that maybe you're running some usability testing, and I might assume that you want a spread of people that have different devices, maybe an equal mix of iOS and Android users. However, if you're just trying to assess a user's need for an app that's a totally new concept, the device usage might be completely irrelevant and secondary to other criteria. So giving that context really helps. 5 years ago, we would only be involved at one stage, and that would be the point of usability testing, most likely. Now we're involved from discovery right through to beta and beyond. It's also best practice to let the participant know what to expect, so if you're doing the recruitment yourself, as a lot of people, in my experience, still assume that research means focus group, and the best participant is someone who's relaxed and open and knows what to expect. So often we're asked to recruit people who are going through a certain experience, and going back to my example of first-time buyers, it isn't always possible to find people in a specific moment of that experience. You've asked us to try and spot a shooting star. It's a rare experience in someone's lifetime that only lasts for a limited period of time. So if you can give people a scenario to use during the research session, and the time frame of their real life experience can maybe be a bit broader depending on where you're at in your research process, then that's really key information to sort of think about when you're putting your recruitment brief together. Again, if you're working with an external recruiter, which I know not everybody does, that kind of information should allow the recruiter greater visibility over what's most important to you. So it's important to make this decision at the start of the research process and consider the impact of different methods of research. If it's self-moderation, what instructions do you need to pass out to participants? If it's in person, again, as I've said, let people know what to expect. Remote testing software can be a bit temperamental, so if it's something that you've set up yourself, make sure that you have someone on hand to support users who are experiencing issues, otherwise you may find that people drop out before completion. If the research is in person, there's a lot of factors that may impact people attending, such as traffic incidents. In London, tube strikes are a regular kind of pain for us because they're often announced sort of at quite short notice when we've already got people booked in. Even things like terrorist attacks, unfortunately, have an impact on a user's experience when coming to a session. We had a client in the news and media industry who upped security at their front desk after the Charlie Hebdo attacks a few years ago. And we had a distraught participant call in outrage, claiming that he was being treated like a terrorist because he had been asked to show ID at the front desk. And I think perhaps it was just because he wasn't expecting that and he maybe just got a bit worked up about the situation. So always let participants know what to expect. Consider the language that you're using too in any of the stuff that you're putting together, whether that's the recruitment brief, any information that you're putting out about the research, whether you're sending email invites out. So I often have participants ask me if they need to wear a suit or dress smartly because we've referred to the research as a research interview. And also explaining how the research will happen allows participants to give informed consent, which is a really important process to go through when you're screening people. So if your users are a niche group of society and you have quite a short window in which to recruit, consider whether you could run some sessions remotely. Although not all technology is always 100% reliable, there's a lot of choice when it comes to things like screen sharing tools and remote moderation tools. Running sessions remotely opens up a much bigger group of people who may struggle to attend research during the day. So where, again, I think Steve made some really relevant points about making assumptions about your environment. So it might not seem important to book space for the research before you start sourcing people, but just imagine being invited to a meeting, or I suppose being invited to anything these days, and not having a fixed location. It might seem like common sense, but I know in some companies we've had experience of clients really struggling to actually secure meeting room space. So it's best to check in advance that you'll definitely have space, because changing the location to a lab on the other side of town when you've got people booked in is a surefire way to increase the rate of people not turning up on the day. Other things to consider is whether your office space or lab is accessible and easy to find. I recommend spending 5 minutes, again, when you're doing this brief at the very start of the process, putting together a short guide and instructions for what people need to do to find your office and what they do when they arrive at reception. And this just saves you time in the long run, because then when you find the right person, you can fire that straight off to them. And again, an external recruiter is likely to pull that together for you. Consider where's best for your user, if it's more appropriate maybe for you to actually travel to them. Also, when thinking about where you're running the research, for some user groups it's advisable to offer travel expenses. We've recruited farmers in the past and asked them to travel from their rural locations, often over an hour drive from where the research is taking place. And so by the time they've driven in, taken part, driven home, they've taken over half a day out of their business to participate. So, covering travel expenses can definitely help with encouraging people to come along. And we also advise offering an incentive to carers attending a research session with a participant. As with where and how, set the date in advance, but be prepared to be flexible if you can. A date is always a good starting point if you are really flexible. But if your date is fixed and less than a week away, then this might reduce the pool of people that you have available to research with. Again, if someone else is doing your recruitment and you are flexible and you can sort of do sessions over a range of different days, share that information and they can choose what's best for the participant. I've had clients come to me on a number of occasions asking to recruit teachers during term time, during the working day, and it's just not possible. And it's frustrating because I appreciate that's often when their stakeholders say, yeah, that's when we're free and that's when we want the research to take place. But ultimately, the message it sends is you just don't understand your users. And this is my favourite slide. Some people are often time poor, so consider your users' need when it comes to taking part in your experience. Can you meet them outside of working hours? And I suppose generally this is just a good rule of thumb. Consider your users' need when it comes to attending the research. Is the time, date and location appropriate? Have you offered them a drink on arrival? Did you tell the reception team who's arriving and when, so that they don't end up flapping around for 5 minutes trying to work out who to call and where to send this poor person that's already probably feeling a bit, intimidated by what to expect? We do a lot of recruitment for various government departments, and we're often recruiting people that we would sort of class as vulnerable participants. And something that we've seen is that actually sending them along to big, shiny corporate office blocks can be really intimidating. And on those types of projects, I think the location does have an impact on potentially a higher number of people dropping out. Overall, we have a good attendance rate, it's sort of 98%, but there are certain projects where it's lower. So we've done work to try and work out what things might be impacting that, to try and sort of make sure that we can give better advice, I suppose. Okay, so these are the essentials. Once you've been through all of these, hopefully you'll have a good starting point for a smooth user recruitment process. So how has recruitment changed? We all know that UX is getting more investment as more companies realise its importance, and the same needs to happen really with user research and user recruitment. When I joined People for Research, I had no idea how much our service would change, and even now I know there's a huge amount we can still learn. Like with outer space or user experience, the more we discover, the more we find we can do to improve what we do as we continue to grow. And just as UX keeps innovating, so must we, whether that be more innovative ways to identify subtle changes in behaviour, better ways to target and approach people as the way that we all communicate and interact with the digital world continues to shift. Being able to predict a recruitment need before we get that first call and thinking about what we might need to be doing to be ready for that, and ensuring our internal learning and development is relevant. So aside from coming up with innovative ideas to support agile teams, looking to work ever more proactively, running live research in real time, here are some of the predictions for the future of user recruitment with emerging technologies. And I would be really interested in other people's opinions, so tweet away, grab me afterwards. So the recruitment for each of these things will require a slightly different approach, in my opinion. So virtual reality, will all users know and understand the difference? For example, I believe that there's probably a lot of Pokemon Go users out there who just saw that as a game, and if you asked them, well, what's your experience with augmented reality, they would probably claim they didn't really know what that was. Are users always going to know what experience they've had? And with artificial intelligence, not all chat services use a bot. As they get better, will people always know if they've had an interaction with AI? As recruiters, we need to know exactly what services are using different pieces of tech to accurately screen. And with robotics, there have been studies to show how robotics can help support vulnerable and elderly people at home, but these groups of people we know are already challenging to recruit and engage in research. And with voice user interfaces, we know a lot of people have Echoes and Google Home devices, but most people don't really know how to use them other than Alexa, tell me a joke. And there are a lot of usability issues as we all learn how to communicate and instruct them using the right syntax, even accent. Most of the time I think how sad I am that I've lost my northern accent, but still I obviously have one because I can never get Siri to understand me when I'm saying, when's the next train from Patchway? I was almost going to do a screenshot, but I was so busy trying to get to the train station that I was like, can't do a screenshot either. I didn't, but maybe I'll do that, so keep an eye on my Twitter, and that might be, I don't know, there's probably hashtags for voice VUI fails, But this is what keeps me doing what we do, because It's always different and it's always interesting, and every day there's always a new challenge.